He almost single-handedly changed the culture of a poverty franchise and brought them a Super Bowl. He led one of the most dominant offenses of all time.
The journey starts tonight.
He broke multiple records and consistently put up MVP caliber numbers in multiple seasons. He's also the most accurate passer of all time. Drew Brees is inarguably one of the greatest quarterbacks, and you could even make a very strong argument for him being top 3. But despite everything Brees has done, many people seem to already forget how great he actually was. So, how good was Drew Brees actually? Drew Brees played a lot of different sports as a kid. He played tennis, baseball, basketball, and football, and he was good at every single one. In high school, Brees would make the varsity team for baseball, basketball, and football. As the varsity starting quarterback, he led the team to a 28-1 record and brought the school their only state title. In 1996, after his school won the state championship, Drew was named the Texas High School 5A Most Valuable Offensive Player. In Drew's high school career, he put up over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. Drew Brees was good, no doubt, but colleges didn't feel the same way. In fact, Drew had not a single offer coming out of high school.
I have the ACL injury my junior year of high school. I'm not recruited at all.
Until at the last second, he received a scholarship from Purdue University. At Purdue, Drew would be named the starter in his true freshman season. In his 4 years there, he recorded over 10,000 yards and 81 touchdowns. He broke the Big Ten Conference record for completions, attempts, and passing yards.
Hey, what's your mom always tell you? If you break it, you fix it. I broke it, but I think I fixed it.
Drew was excellent at Purdue, but because he was only 5'11", many NFL scouts doubted him at the next level. Regardless, Drew Brees would be selected by the San Diego Chargers in the second round of the 2001 draft. The start of Drew's career would be a pretty bad one. In his rookie year, he would be sitting behind the Chargers quarterback at the time, Doug Flutie, who would mentor the young Drew Brees. After the Chargers went 5-11 in the 2001 season, Drew Brees would take over as a starter for the next year.
Drew Brees will be taking his first NFL snaps.
His debut for the Chargers would be a good one, completing 15 of his 19 attempts for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brees would lead the team to being 6-1 to start the season, and everything was looking good, but that turned out to be pretty short-lived. The Chargers would finish 8-8, and Brees would have a pretty bad first season. He did throw for over 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns, but along with that, he also threw 16 interceptions. 2003 though would be even worse. Brees led the Chargers to a 1-7 record before being benched for Doug Flutie, though he would get his job back in week 14. Brees that season threw for 11 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. As you could probably expect, Drew Brees began to be doubted by his team. The Chargers were unsure if Drew Brees was their guy, which is why in next year's draft, they went out and got Phillip Rivers in the first round. Brees would begin to slowly show his elite potential in the next few years, but a bad shoulder injury would eventually force the Chargers to move on from Drew.
Drew Brees suffered a needless injury.
In free agency, he would be wanted by mainly 2 teams, the Dolphins and the Saints. Drew Brees was ready to sign with the Miami Dolphins, but after the team doctor said he failed his physical, they let him go. And so, Drew Brees would head to New Orleans and sign with the Saints. In New Orleans, Drew would start off right. The 2006 season would have the Saints finishing 10-6. They would secure the number 2 seed, granting the Saints a playoff berth. In the divisional round against the number 3 seeded Eagles, Brees would throw for 243 yards and a touchdown. The Saints would eliminate the Eagles and gain their first ever divisional round victory in franchise history. The Saints would then face the Bears in the conference championship, where Brees would throw for 354 yards and 2 touchdowns. But it wouldn't be enough because the Saints would still fall 14-39. Even though the Saints had lost, not all was bad, because in just 1 year with this new team, they had done more than what they did in 39. New Orleans knew they had something special. Drew Brees that year led the league in passing yards with 4,418. He was so good that he made the Pro Bowl, was named first team All-Pro, and was a finalist for the MVP, but came in second place, something that would reoccur multiple times. Drew Brees and the Saints would have a pretty good 2007 and 2008 season, but it was the 2009 season that was special.
We smell greatness. We finish strong. From the top.
In the home opener of the season against the Detroit Lions, Drew would throw for over 350 yards and 6 touchdowns. And just like that, everyone knew this year they would be dominant, and dominate they were, winning 13 games in a row and finishing with a record of 13-3. Drew Brees in the regular season threw for over 4,000 yards and led the league with 34 touchdowns and a 70.6 completion rate. The Saints were by far the best NFC team in the regular season, and Brees made another strong case for MVP, but like usual, he fell in second place, this time to Peyton Manning. In the divisional round of the playoffs, the number 1 seeded Saints faced off against the number 4 seeded Cardinals. Brees threw for 247 yards and 4 touchdowns in a dominant 45-14 victory. The next game though wouldn't be as easy. The Saints and the Brett Favre-led Vikings would be fighting for a spot in the Super Bowl. After going back and forth, scoring touchdown after touchdown, the Vikings and Saints were tied up 28-28 going into overtime. Drew Brees would lead the Saints down the field for a successful field goal kick that would secure the spot in the Super Bowl. Drew Brees in that game would throw for almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in a nail-biting 31-28 victory. The Saints won the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history.
The party is just getting started. After more than 4 decades, the New Orleans Saints are going to their first ever Super Bowl.
All they had to do now was beat the Peyton Manning-led Colts. Most people, when they get on the biggest stage of football, would begin to crumble under pressure, but not Drew Brees. He excelled in it. Drew Brees completed 32 out of his 39 passes for almost 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Drew Brees was almost perfect in his game, and after a huge interception, the New Orleans Saints brought back home their first ever Super Bowl. Drew Brees was named the MVP of Super Bowl 44. The following season in 2010, the Saints were looking strong once again, finishing with a record of 11-5. However, that playoff run would be cut short after the infamous Beastquake. 2011 though was arguably Drew's best season. The Saints that year had offensive weapons like Jimmy Graham, Marcus Colston, and Darren Sproles, and they also had 3 Pro Bowlers on the O-line. Everything was set up perfectly for Drew Brees, and the Saints have a monster season. And what proceeded next was one of the most dominant offenses to ever play football. Drew Brees in 2011 would throw for over 300 yards 13 times and had a total of 5,476 passing yards, which at the time was a new record, and threw for 46 touchdowns. He did all that on a 71% completion rate. The Saints racked up 7,474 total yards, the most by any offense ever, and averaged 34.2 points per game. And you want to know something crazy? Despite being 13-3, the Saints only made the 3rd seed that season. 2011 was a historic year for offenses. For the 3rd time in his career, Drew Brees was a finalist for the MVP trophy, where he would fall in 2nd place yet again, this time to Aaron Rodgers. And this still wouldn't be the last time this happened. The Saints offense that was steamrolling teams in the regular season only got better in the postseason. In the wildcard game against the Lions, Drew would throw for 466 yards and 4 touchdowns in a 45-28 victory. The divisional game against the 49ers, however, would prove to be pretty difficult for the Saints. Really? I'm only talking about the defense, because on the offensive side, Drew threw for 462 yards and 4 touchdowns. With 1 minute remaining, the 49ers offense drove down the field and killed the Saints' playoff hopes. If that Saints defense hadn't choked, I truly believe the Saints could have won the Super Bowl that year, because the next team they would have faced is the 9-7 Giants. From 2012 to 2016, the New Orleans Saints would hit a slump, having only 1 season where they had a positive record. But even then, Drew Brees was still putting up numbers, hitting close to 5,000 passing yards and close to 40 touchdowns every single year, and also made the Pro Bowl 4 out of the 5 seasons. Brees was still an elite quarterback, but his team was seriously holding him back. The last true run the Saints had at winning another Super Bowl would be in 2017 to 2018, because in the 2017 offseason, the Saints would have one of the best drafts, not just in franchise history, but ever, drafting players like Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, and of course, Alvin Kamara and Marshawn Lattimore, who would go on and win Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year. Combine those rookies with players like Michael Thomas, Mark Ingram, and the powerhouse of an O-line they had that year, and you got a Super Bowl contending team. In 2017, Drew Brees would lead the Saints to an 11-5 record, throwing for over 4,000 yards on a 72% completion rate. They would make it all the way to the divisional round, where Brees would throw for almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think we all know how that ended. But 2018 is a year where Drew should have won another Super Bowl. Having come off a pretty good season with a disappointing end, the Saints only got better in 2018. Significantly better. The Saints would lose their first game of the season, but after that, they went on a 10-game winning streak, ending the season with a record of 13-3 and the number 1 seed. Drew Brees, for the last time in his career, was a finalist for MVP, but as you can probably expect by now, he came in 2nd place again. Drew Brees that year threw for almost 4,000 yards, But the most impressive stat is his 74.4% completion rate, which is still an NFL record to this day. In the divisional round, the Saints would face off against the Eagles, where Brees would throw for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in an extremely close game. But an interception by Marshawn Lattimore sealed their win. The Saints just had to overcome the Los Angeles Rams, and Drew would be in his second Super Bowl. The game was close, but ultimately, it was looking like the Saints were going to win it. They only needed a first down to seal the game with 1 minute and 40 seconds left.
You don't have to be a Saints fan to be upset by this. You don't have to be a football fan, even a sports fan, but just a fan of basic fairness. Are we going to sit down in 2 weeks to watch the Super Bowl and wonder, is the right team in this game? It's being referred to as one of the worst missed calls in playoff history. The New Orleans Saints missed a place in the Super Bowl after referees didn't throw the flag on this play. Many call it a glaring case of pass interference.
That is still probably the most glaring no call in all of sports history. And of course, out of all people, it happened to Drew Brees. After that, Drew played 2 more years before he finally retired, but he never came close to touching a Super Bowl again. 2018 was really the last good chance that Drew had to get another ring before his arm just gave out. Drew Brees played a long and fruitful career. He held the record for most career passing yards until Tom Brady came back out of retirement and broke it. In the entire span of his career, Drew Brees threw for 80,358 yards and was by far the most accurate passer of all time with a career 67.7 completion rate. He also threw for 571 touchdowns. Drew Brees is no doubt a Hall of Fame quarterback. He gave New Orleans his all until the very end, until he couldn't throw anymore. His shoulder injury that he faced early in his career came back to bite him, as nowadays he physically can't throw with his right arm anymore. Drew Brees came in and single-handedly changed the culture of a poverty team and turned them into winners. He brought hope to a city that really needed it. Even though he might not have the rings or accolades that every other legendary quarterback has, the career of Drew Brees was a great one. He went from being a freshman B-team quarterback, no offers in college, and being a bench warmer with the Chargers, to not just being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but one of the greatest players to ever touch a football.